Thanks for joining us in the MRD chat room. I'm Philip Hackett. In a very short time, Barbados will be attaining republic status. The occasion will coincide with the 55th anniversary of independence. In this episode of MRD Chat Room, Donna Cox chats with historian Morris Greenidge. He reflects on the period leading up to independence. He examines the impact of independence on Barbados and the significance of our island now becoming a republic. Let's join Donna and Morris Greenidge.
So, Morris, we pulled down the Union Jack and hoisted up the broken trident, and we became independent. But tell us now, because there are a lot of people that weren't born back then, and they came into this independence. But what does independence really mean?
In a nutshell, broadly, means standing on your own 2 feet. Mm-hmm. Just think of yourself as a teenager. Mm-hmm. Fall in love.
Just yesterday.
Oh, yes. And you decide you want to get married, but you don't have the means to go on your own. Mm-hmm. So you live with either your parents or your husband's parents for a while.
Right.
And then after the first couple of years, you may have a few cents, but you have enough, your salary's probably gone up, to go rent somebody's house. Then you have become, in a sense, independent from your parents.
Right. So in essence, Barbados has become independent from, I guess,
its parents,
yeah, which would be the monarchy. But you know, that whole aspect of standing on your own 2 feet has to be an exciting venture and yet somewhat scary. What was it like before Barbados hit that 1966 mark? Were people all excited about independence in Barbados?
People were very excited about it in 3 different ways.
Okay.
Some were excited good, some were excited very good, and some were excited but afraid of it. Because you had people leaving because of impending independence. They could not see it happen, and so many of them migrated. Then you had those who, oh yeah, okay, things will be better. But then there were those who really looked forward to it. And there were other people. For instance, there was the Windrush generation who were in England, for instance, and seeing hard times in England and look forward to coming back home and making their marks.
So these were people who did not leave Barbados because of independence pending. They were already living in England before the concept of independence became a reality.
That's right.
Okay, so over there they wanted to come back home.
Because England was harsh.
Okay.
England was very, very difficult for black people, especially living in communities. Right. The individual black people apparently did not have problems. But those living in places like London and Leeds and so on had major problems of assimilation. And then you had what they called them, the skinheads and the teddy boys and whatever else. And you had political parties. In fact, both political parties were so afraid, like what is happening now in the United States. They were so afraid of the people that they pandered to the people rather than say, well, you know, this is not right.
Right. So there were Bajans abroad who were going through hardships and figured that it would be better to come back home.
If they could.
If they could.
Yeah.
All right.
But of course, you know, there was a downside to that.
Yeah.
Because if you hadn't yet accumulated enough to make sense to come back home, you didn't want to come back home because you're going to be laughed at.
Right.
So many of them did not come back. Some never came back. But those who could, especially the ones who went into universities and so on and got their degrees, they were eager to come back and be a part of this bright new venture of independence.
So I'm thinking now about those people that stayed, that never left Barbados. They might not have had the means to leave if they wanted to, but what were some of the things that maybe they were thinking about, those who were not too sure about independence? What were some of the fears that they may have spoken of in terms of not wanting to do it?
For some people, you can count me among those. I made a decision that I was not going anywhere because of all of my friends, fact, nearly all of my school friends.
Right.
There's some I have never seen since we left school. And I said, I'm not leaving. Somebody's got to stay and mind the shop.
Right.
Remember that things were tough. The war had ended. You had austerity virtually. Luckily, prices did not go up too much worldwide. But here, during the war years, prices went up. Even basic supplies like potatoes and yams, the prices went up.
Right.
So people had a tough time. And so you couldn't blame people for wanting to get away from it and see what else they could do, what they could do better for themselves and their families.
Right.
My mother went away when I was, 13, 14, but I decided I wasn't going.
Right.
I stayed, and I was very excited about independence.
So tell me, with independence, what were people like yourself expecting to see or expecting to happen come November 30th, 1966?
I don't know if a lot of people expected anything. They were just looking forward like Christmas. What's going to happen? I don't think they knew. It was a new concept. What you do afterwards, you look back and you realize, for instance, that Barbados was virtually in the 100, 200 years before virtually supporting its parent.
Ah. And a lot of people don't really realize that, you know. They always thought that the parent was supporting the child Barbados.
No,
Yes.
wasn't so.
Okay.
The labor of Africa and the whole concept of the sugar economy
Yes.
supported Britain, made Britain extremely wealthy.
Right.
And so by time I think Trinidadians were the first, by the time the Federation was failing, Britain realized she had to get these children out of the house. And so it was easy for her to go towards letting the children go,
Ah.
virtually begging them to leave.
Right. Right.
So from that standpoint, it was easy. But you know, we had there were the fearful people, as I mentioned earlier, who couldn't see, and there were those who were looking forward to a change, one way or the other.
Right.
Whether to come back or whether to look forward to whatever else was going to happen.
Now, you mentioned before the people who had gone off on the Windrush. But after that lot of people left, was there migration because independence was looming? And where did those people go to?
Well, you had a whole set of people who went to Canada and a whole set of people who went to Australia.
Okay.
And a few went to New Zealand as well.
All right.
And
You
they
can
were
find it
not
being
people
all
of
over.
they were not people of my color, because those people were not in those days particularly welcome in those three countries I mentioned.
Okay. All right. So they took their money with them and they left, or they just left?
I suspect they took their money. Well, I know they left their houses,
Right.
but quite a few people left Barbados.
So what would have been some of the expectations of what would happen at independence, either good or bad?
Well, some people couldn't see themselves, first of all, some people couldn't see themselves being, use the word, ruled by certain types of people, by the former enslaved. Certain people could not envisage, not a matter of seeing now, but could not envisage the possibility that this thing could happen, it could work out. It might happen for a few weeks or a few months, but eventually we're going to have to be eating one another.
So we weren't supposed to be capable of
Nah,
governing
of
ourselves?
course not.
Okay,
That wasn't going to happen.
right. Because I also know that there were a number of people who did not have the means to leave. And they didn't have much in Barbados at all. But they themselves did not want to have that whole independence standing on their own 2 feet, because they'd never believed that they could stand on their own feet.
Right.
They were that downtrodden.
Well, that happens, I mean, on the individual basis. That's the same thing I was talking about young people getting married.
Mm-hmm.
Some people take a long, long time before they can settle into the idea.
Right.
of moving away from home to start a new home. It's difficult for them to see it, and then if it does happen, it happens very, very slowly.
Yes. Because you really have to go through lots of changes, and people don't really like change.
People do not like to change.
So now we're into independence now. We've gone past the major ceremony at the Garrison, Savannah, and we've got
The fireworks.
the fireworks and
Yeah,
everything.
the Diana Ross,
Yes.
the Supremes.
Yes. And then it's life. So what happened? What changes did you see in Barbados after independence as an independent nation?
Huge. And it started before. Well, let me just put it this way. The whole idea and the concept of independence had started before. Let's go back to what I call the real emancipation, which is 1938.
Yes, yes.
And which is 100 years after the Emancipation Act.
Yes.
It took us 100 years for that to come into fruition. It's like you getting married and you can't consummate your marriage for 100 years.
You can kiss the no.
100 years.
Yeah.
Until this young man from Bayland and Trinidad comes up here and creates a fuss.
Yes.
And because that tinder box gets lighted, the things blow up in July 1937. And the aftermath of that, with the Moyne Commission and the Dean Commission and all the other commissions, which they were even afraid to publish, that galvanized changes.
Right.
And from then you had, first of all, you had the majority of Barbadians being able to vote.
Okay.
I remember that pre-1937, I suspect that less than a quarter of Barbadians would have been eligible to vote.
And was that based on things like land ownership, based on their ability to read and write?
Income.
Okay.
I think to them it was like £50 a year, which was a lot of money, loads of money in those days.
Wow.
And then I think 1948 it changed. And then of course in 1951, there was universal adult suffrage. 1950 the
Yes.
act was passed, 1951. Everybody over 21, for the first time, whether you could read and write or whatever, you had the right to vote.
So you're moving towards this.
That is it.
Being able to stand on your own
Inexorably
two feet.
towards independence.
Yes, fantastic. And then it happened.
And then political parties changed, as always, well, since then has been happening. And one party thought that the other one, yes, you're doing the right thing, but you're doing it too slowly, so let's
Speed it up.
have a move on. And so the other party took control 10 years later, 1961. And the first major thing that happened is that immediately you had free secondary education. I don't want to use the word free, but free direct payments for secondary education. So the parents did not have to pull that out of their pockets directly. It means that every fellow in the district, whether he could afford that $850 per term, which was a whole set of money or not, $50 per term.
$8.50 a term.
A lot of money. Couldn't afford it. People could not afford it. So that everybody at 14, I would say out of a class of 30, probably 27 went to learn the trades or stayed working in the fields. And 3 boys would have gone to a secondary school.
Okay, and that
In
was
1961, after the 61 elections, 1962, everybody, once you pass the exam for a school, you went into a secondary school, and the taxpayer, not your parent, paid for your school fees.
But you know, all along we hear, or we hear that secondary education became free after 1966.
No.
Okay.
I think it started actually in 62 because
Right.
the election was, I think, December 61.
Right.
So from the 62 year, it would have happened.
So this again is movement towards the independence. All right. So it was expected then that with independence you would have greater access to whatever school you wanted at that point in time then, or
Well, once you passed for it,
once you passed for
you
it?
had
Yes.
to, and then of course, when I went into secondary school, I sat 2 exams. They
Okay.
wanted to go to Combermere, so I sat for Combermere, and my grandmother, who was then in charge, because my mother had gone on to city, got to go sit for Courage and Prairie as well. I passed for both.
Right.
But then she looked at it and she said, "Boy, you passed for both schools." But the bus fare for Combermere is 12 cents. The bus fare for Courage School is 6 cents. You know which side you're going.
Of course.
It's a matter of
Yes.
economics.
Right.
So I went north
Yes.
because the journey was short
Yes.
and the bus fare was shorter.
Shorter. Okay.
And that happened until then we had the whole concept of the common entrance exam, where then you were classified by the marks you got.
And the choices that you made.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Understood. All right. So what else was expected to happen after 1966?
Well, you had a gradual, going back to 1953, you had a gradual improvement in health. You had your first health center in 1953. That's the Spitestown Arlington,
Okay.
Spitestown Health Center. Then in 55, you had Enmore. And then
I remember
think
hearing about Enmore.
57, you had, I think it was St. Philip. So you're widening the health base, and you have district nurses. I remember Aurora Walters at Titan.
Yes.
She was in charge of Arlington, of the St. Peter one when it opened. And Dr. Morris Bayer, who became Sir Morris Bayer for his pioneering work. So that's also very important because you've changed the whole course of medicine, and you're making it. 1948, I forgot to mention this. 1948, you had your first maternity hospital
Okay.
at Verona and Bank Hall,
Right.
and that later served as labor office after the hospital was built. But you had this place dedicated to childbirth.
So really and truly, independence, the achievement of independence was not today we belong to someone, or we have pledged allegiance to another flag, and then tomorrow it's new and every. It was a gradual.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Gradual.
I'd say that we started going towards. I used the year 1938 as my watershed.
Right.
Because this is I call this the aftermath of emancipation. The 100th and the centennial of the Emancipation Act of 1838, when things went backwards rather than
Forward.
forwards,
Right.
and real wages went backwards, and the laws that freed you were counteracted and countermanded by laws that kept you tied to the plantations.
Right.
The Located Laborers Act and the Masters and Servants Acts and those pieces of terrible legislation that said that, yeah, you're free, but you're only free to do what I want you to do.
Yes. Yes.
So 1938 was the beginning, and we never looked back. There was a gradual ascent towards independence as we see it today. It didn't jump at you.
Right.
But the biggest thing I thought was the secondary education. Then, of course, within 2 or 3 years, you had University of the West Indies opening the Cave Hill campus. It had started at the harbor, but I think around 1967, it started at Cave Hill campus opened.
You said it started at the Arbor?
At the harbor, yes.
Harbor, okay.
Yeah, at the harbor site.
Okay.
Around
Very interesting.
63, I think it was. Just where just south of the Shallow Draft, where the customs department is.
Okay.
That area.
I had no
That's
idea.
there, yeah.
Right.
That's why it's called University Drive, University Row. By the
little
roundabout.
roundabout?
Yes.
Okay.
Just down there.
Fantastic. So we had a literally slow,
The plane is
gradual
taking off.
progression. And then 1966 happened, and from, I don't know where the time went.
It went quickly, And it went slowly for some people, but quickly because there's a lot to be done. And you need the wherewithal to do things.
Yes.
We did not have that wherewithal.
Right.
We squandered that money. In fact, we gave it away. That money that we made, those immense riches that we made,
Yes.
went to the mother country.
Right. Right. Yes. And we have
So
to
we
literally start from scratch.
supported our parents.
Yeah. And
to
they have
our
to
own
fend for
detriment.
ourselves.
So that's why when people talk about independence, our situation, and for more countries in the Caribbean than ourselves, but particularly for Barbados, which was really I would say Barbados was the space in which nearly all of the experiments on the social arrangements were made.
Right.
Social arrangements and living arrangements with the slaves and what would happen in the sugar net. Only today I was reading how as early as I was looking at the blacks who came in 1627, and to discover that in 1643 I could never find them. All of a sudden in 1643 I am seeing an affidavit for a mortgage and the names of 8 enslaved people
Wow.
at Trent's plantation in Whole Town.
Wow.
And I'm saying, are these the relics? Are these the survivors of the 1620s? It's only 16 years. Or are these descendants? Or are these, no, 1643 is a major year because that's the year that the experiment in sugar now begins.
Right.
So I'm wondering if these are new people that have come in for sugar.
Now, talking about sugar, I know that for some people it's a really rough, raw spot because on the one hand, sugar was
It's sweet.
it's sweet, real sweet. But on the other hand, it's a mark of that part of our history that a lot of people want to put aside now. We're educated now, so we have to get the plantation. We're out of the plantation in a sense, but is the plantation out of us?
Yes and no. I think the whole idea of 61 and 66 has changed that. That most people, in fact, many of those people from 61 and 66, I'm talking education,
Right.
are not aware of that past. And don't forget that we did not do our own history until relatively recent.
Right.
So that the whole concept of a Nelson, for instance, is strange to us, and we're fighting all over it because we don't know the history.
Yes.
So a lot of us did not know the history of even the plantations and so on. We did not do Barbados history until long after you
Yes.
restarted
Right.
here.
So at this stage now, we are independent. We are no longer being taken care of by our parents, but
Nor are we taking care of our parents.
we're not taking care of them,
Yeah.
but we still are paying homage, in a sense, to them by certain vestiges that we do have. We've got a governor general that is the representative of our parents. We still have various areas in the country that we name after the parents and our parents' family. And well, up until recently, we had Lord Nelson in the middle of town, reminding us that parents are watching you, in a sense. But we're moving now again into a different realm of self-determination, and there's talk of republic. How is that different to independence?
Well, it's different in this sense that no more will you be paying rent because your landlord can say, I want my house, my daughter's coming home with her family in January, so I'm giving you notice at the end of December, I need the house. Now you're buying your own house.
Aha.
So you've gone and you've bought your own house, and now you become Lord and Master of what you survey inside your four walls. You have now reached another level of achievement.
So we no longer have to be paying a mortgage instead of a rent.
You might, or you might have saved the money,
Yeah, it might
I
have
know
saved
some
the
people
money.
might have been lucky to have saved the money and
Right.
bought it,
Right.
or built it.
From scratch.
Because some people would have built.
Right.
When I grew up, you built your own house because everybody built a wooden house. And never mind what it was.
It was
If you
yours.
built it, it was yours.
Yes.
And you
So,
got the land to do it on.
right.
Yeah.
So now we're moving into
Different
Repub-
phase.
I wonder, I know that the same way we had people who had various emotions about going into independence, right now we also have people who are going into different stages of emotions and fears and excitement about the republic, going republic. What have you noticed, or what can you share with us about some of the feelings that people have going into the republic? Is it the same as going to independence?
A little different because in independence you had 3 factions. At this stage you will only have 2. You probably won't have the faction that would have gone to Australia.
Right.
But you would certainly have a faction that, and Arabara put it nicely, wants to loiter on your steps after closing time.
Yes.
Go home. There is that faction that will want to be tied to Britain, and some of them have good reasoning within their own minds. It may be false, but for them it's good reasoning. They figure that it is safe to be tied to auntie's apron strings. But if we have cultivated the foreign policy that one expects to have been cultivated, there's absolutely no fear.
Right.
And what you're actually doing now, and what you're seeing now as an independent nation without being a republic, nothing worse can happen to us. Because you're seeing the agreements, you're seeing every now and again somebody's picking at you, saying, hey, you're doing this wrong, and you're letting people come and use you as a tax haven. You're seeing that.
Right.
They can only do the same thing after.
Exactly. And besides, we've been taking care of ourselves all this time.
Exactly.
It wouldn't really make that much of a difference.
It won't.
However, there will be some kind of changes that we should be able to see that says we are now republic. What would be some of those, besides having, I guess, our own president as opposed to a governor general?
Yeah. Well, the constitution will be changed to reflect the various instances of connection
Right.
with the mother country. We will become a more independent. Right now, we still depend on Britain for certain things. We still have to go through them for certain things. But the major things, I think, will be largely cosmetic. But then the whole idea of, as I said to you, owning your house rather than paying rent,
Yes.
to me is huge.
Now, on a more individualistic level, we talked about people's fears and concerns, but do you think that when compared to maybe even pre-independence, where we were more resilient as a people because we had to be, that individuals now are more independent, or are they now more dependent on the system that we have called our government?
There's a whole change. Let's say there's a whole lifestyle change that has enveloped this country over the last 54 years. The whole lifestyle of our people has changed, and that's been demanded of us. We had to make those changes. But sometimes you could say that some people do not appreciate, and that perhaps is part of the lack of learning, the lack of understanding the history. You know, they say if you don't know your history, you're doomed.
Yes, yes.
But those of us, and I think that there are enough of us who understand where we've come from and have an idea of what we should be doing to chart a course for the future.
Right. So there is lots of excitement about Republic. There are many concerns, but I think the excitement is outweighing the concerns. What do you think?
I know it is.
Yes.
I know it is. And I was very heartened to see, with the removal of Nelson, for instance,
Yes.
not only the fact that it happened, but the manner in which it happened, the
Yes.
decorum,
Yes.
the deference that took place, and the lack of aggression. I just love to see that.
And you know, the phrase that had been coined throughout this whole thing is, "This is who we are." I think we're finally coming to understand who we are, and it's being shown.
I hope we are.
I'm holding on to that.
We need to.
Yes.
We need to understand. I think
Yes.
we're getting there.
Yes. Well, Morris, I want to thank you so much for sharing this afternoon with us and for enlightening us to some extent. You have a book that you have been reading, and you were telling me all about this book before we started our interview. It is a book about Elliot Belgrave?
Notes on a
Yes.
Native Governor General.
Yes.
It's a superb book. It is required reading for every Barbadian school child
Yes.
and for every Barbadian adult.
Yes.
This means you have to get one
I
for
have to
Chris.
get one for myself.
You have to get one for yourself.
Yes.
It is a journey that it will take you back to your own school days.
Right.
You were schooled in Canada, I believe?
Yes, I started in
Yeah,
Canada,
yeah.
then in Barbados, and back to Canada. Yes.
Right. It's a journey.
Yes.
And it's a remarkable book that I think every Barbadian child, every Barbadian adult should read.
And maybe that will help some of our Barbadians who were not back in the times when pre-independence, but it might help them to understand a bit more about what it really means to be independent and understand, you know, who we are, and that, you know, this is not our final destination.
It will give them a hope. It will give them an understanding of where we came from, to be the first person in this village to go to secondary school. That kind of stuff.
Yes.
You're looking at the sort of grasping and hanging on by your fingernails and toenails,
Yes.
and making sure that you don't let your parents down,
Right.
and don't let your village down, because the village is looking on,
You carry the village on your back.
hoping that you make it.
Yes.
And this is the sort of book that I think that will help our youngsters to understand where we have come from, and give them an idea as to what we have come to, but also hope for where we can go.
And I do believe that was either written or edited by another educator.
Yes,
Alvin
Alvin Adams.
Yes.
I left him at school, and always talented.
Yes.
And he was a senator. I think Sir Elliot chose him as one of the independent senators.
Right.
But it's a beautiful book. Story is well told,
Yes.
and very well written.
And look how we've come full circle back to our roots
That's right.
of being able to pass a story on,
That's right.
to remind us about where we've come from and help us to chart the way forward to where we're going.
That is who we are.
That's who we are. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us on MRD Chatroom. If all goes well, we'll see you again soon. Goodbye. Thank you again.
My pleasure.